Met through a mutual friend, a very good friend of mine who I've been friends with now for years. As a matter of fact, that particular person was a guest on my show 16 years ago whenever I kicked off on the air, and she has since moved on to do many other things. But one of them was work on this book project called News Chaser, The Rhetoric of Trump in Essays and Commentaries. And one of the contributors to the book is my guest this morning, and that is Anne Marie Waterman. And I'm going to introduce Anne Marie. Anne Marie Waterman is celebrating the completion of her third year at Howard. And I always make sure I get my diction together. I don't want you to confuse. Howard with Harvard. And I've been to both, and they are equally important universities. Howard University School of Law as the Assistant Dean for Administration and Operations. In her previous role, she served as the Assistant Dean of Administration in the School of Business at Howard University. As the Assistant Dean, she assists the Dean with the management and development of the school, especially the administration and fiscal affairs. Her major role is to ensure budgetary, personnel administrative, and information technology compliance and efficiency. Her other duties include serving on various committees and lending her enrollment management functional knowledge to ensure seamless student, faculty, and staff experiences. She also serves as adjunct faculty. Ms. Waterman focused the first part of her professional career on government affairs, initially coordinating government relations for the Computer and Business Equipment Manufacturers Association, and later managing fiscal, administrative, and technical services on behalf of the Council for Educational Development and Research. She then returned to Howard University in a leadership role overseeing enrollment management operations for 7 years. Her work at Howard including serving as the Director of Admissions and Deputy to the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management. In these roles, she successfully managed the university's $12 million freshman merit-based scholarship program that awarded scholarships to over 400 freshmen annually. Following a 3-year tenure with the College Board as a senior higher education manager for the Middle States region, Ms. Waterman returned to campus life at the University of the District of Columbia as the Assistant Dean for Student Services in their School of Business and Public Administration. There, she was responsible for all aspects of student affairs in the business school, from recruitment, advising, and registration to graduation clearance. She served on various university-wide committees, including chairing the Retention Committee. She also taught the freshman orientation sections dedicated to business majors. Shortly thereafter, she was asked by the provost to assume a new role, Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management and Director of Admissions. Her new role included managing the Office of Financial Aid, Student Orientation, and International Student Affairs. In this role, she was responsible for budgetary oversight of $3 million. That was the operating budget. A $1 million consultant budget and $25 million financial aid revenue generating income. Mrs. Waterman was born in London, England, to Caribbean parentage. Completed her primary school years in England and Jamaica. All right, now graduated from American High School in Miami, Florida, and then enrolled at Howard University. Although Ms. Waterman began her college career as a math major, she changed her major to history and business communications and then completed her Master of Arts in All right, I have that same master's, yes, in organizational communication. She is currently pursuing MBA and doctorate degrees. Anne Marie Waterman, good morning.
Good morning. My goodness, I don't even recognize myself after all of that.
You know, and I do that for a reason, because a lot of times people contact me and say, well, you don't have to read the whole thing, read parts of it. You know, I like to read the whole thing because I like the listening audience to know it can be done. And I like them, what I hope folks will hear, that they don't just hear blah, 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 or they get bored by the bio, but they will actually be inspired to say, you know what, if Anne Marie can do that, I can do something too. So that's always my intent when I read the entire bio. Congratulations to you. There are so many things in the bio I can connect with. And as we talk, you know, I'll bring them out in the questioning. So, okay. First thing, I will say this before we even get started in terms of my experience with HBCUs. Whenever I went to college, I graduated high school, and actually the university where the radio station sits is my alma mater. And it was predominantly, at the time, and it still is for the most part, at the time I was a Caucasian makeup. The mix has changed over the years, but back in the 80s, predominantly Caucasian with a speck of African Americans here and there. I didn't have my first experience with an HBCU until I was working for AT&T, and I went out as a guest lecturer to North Carolina Central University. And Ms. Waterman, when I got on there, everything on the campus was black, from the president down to the deans. That impressed me so much. I mean, I had never experienced that feeling before.
It is an amazing experience to be in a place where everyone you see, or most everyone you see, looks like you, and they're doing things that you have often associated with people with,
right.
other races.
That's absolutely right.
It just never occurred to you. But the other thing that happens as a default from that, and certainly happened for me, is you realize that, if so-and-so can be a PhD, well, so can I.
Right.
Things that otherwise would never have crossed your mind all of a sudden become very visibly attainable. And it changes your perspective and your role in life and the choices that you make.
No, it really does. And ultimately, my daughters wound up going to an HBCU. They went to, both of them graduated from Delaware State University. And so I had the experience of going to visit them and seeing it. But I'm telling you, when I left North Carolina Central, I was blown away. I mean, I think I still have, and some of those people have probably passed on by now, but I think I still have some of the business cards I collected that day. And again, to see the deans and the VPs and the presidents and the supervisors and this, that, and the other, all of them had attained those degrees and those positions. And for the kids to be able to see that, as you just said, it gives them something to strive for.
Absolutely. It's a powerful experience. But, I have to be honest with you, as you talk about HBCUs, which clearly have a special place in my heart. Prior to high school, I knew nothing about HBCUs either. I ended up at Howard, one might think by happenstance, but actually I would say divine order.
Right.
I was all set and registered, knew my roommate, everything to attend the University of Florida. Tuition all done, scholarship, lock, stock, packed, ready to go. And I guess about maybe a few days before Howard's deadline, my guidance counselor, Ms. Johnson, who I will be forever grateful to, said, I noticed that you didn't complete any applications for HBCUs. So Ms. Johnson was like a god on campus. Whatever she said, you just went with because she just made miracles happen. And so she said, I've left an application on my chair. You go ahead and complete it, and I'll take care of the rest. Well, Ms. Johnson said, I did, and the rest is history. I got my acceptance to Howard a week before orientation. I called University of Florida. Thank you so much for your offer. I will not be attending. Now, what you have to bear in mind to appreciate this is no housing, no scholarship, but that didn't matter to me. I knew somehow in my gut this is where I needed to be. At one point I wanted to go to NYU. My wife was having no parts of going to New York, not her daughter. And so, in my mind I'm thinking Washington, geographically, not that far away.
Right.
I've heard some stuff about Howard. Yeah, this is better than going to the bushes as far as I was concerned.
Right.
Gainesville, Florida. So I ended up at Howard, and it is the single best choice I have ever made in my entire life.
And I'm not surprised by that. And for those of you who are listening who are affiliated with other universities, I'm not taking anything away from because like I said, I'm sitting here on the campus of my alma mater. I've done school here. I've done school at Fairleigh Dickinson. I've done school back here again. I've done some studies in Princeton. I've done some studies in Harvard. I have visited the campuses of Howard. I have some of my best friends have graduated from Howard. Keith Hawkins. As soon as I saw that, he came to mind. Keith went to Howard and had a grand time down there and has been uber successful. I mean, he's worked for companies like J. Crew and Toys R Us and just all over the place into the financial management arena. So graduates who come out of HBCUs are just as capable as any other university. And the fact that you go to an HBCU does not negate if you want to now go to one of the other universities and vice versa. Say, for example, right now, if I wanted to now go do some studies at an HBCU, there's nothing stopping me from doing that because I went to universities that were not HBCU. All right, so I'm looking here. You say your parentage is of Caribbean background. Is that Jamaica?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I always ask because my wife is from Jamaica, so I have a special affinity for Jamaica. They call me an honorary Jamaican.
No, honorary Jamaican. Very good.
Yep, I'm an honorary Jamaican.
are both Jamaican, but interestingly enough, though they live just miles apart in Jamaica did not know each other there. It's when they both went to England, my mother to nursing school, and my father in the usual trend of you go, if you're in the Caribbean, you
right.
go to England to better yourself, quote unquote.
Correct.
And it's there that they met. So we always laugh about the fact that, they were around the corner from each other and didn't talk.
Wow.
Go away and how, foreign lands create interesting relationships.
Do you know what parish they were in when they were around the road from each other?
Yeah, they're both in St. James.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the bigger parishes. My father both went to high school in Montego Bay, which is a part that most people know of.
Yeah, that's where I got married. I got married in Montego Bay.
Kingston and Jamaica are the two, Kingston
right.
and Montego Bay are the two places that most people know. So, Montego Bay being on the north coast, the more touristy side, and Kingston being the more industrial side. So, yeah. Yeah,
I was married. People look. I just had this conversation 2 days ago with somebody and who happened to be of Jamaican descent as well. And I said, I've driven that one side of the entire island. The Portland side I haven't been on, but the side from Kingston all the way up through Ochi to Montego Bay to Negril. And when I tell people that I drive, they say, no, wait, you mean you ride with somebody? No, I rent a car and I drive. And they look at me, they say, I'm from there and I don't drive. Like, you're crazy.
Hey, you've driven to New York, and it's about the same.
Yes, that's exactly. My mother, like, when she comes up, if we drive to New York, she is a nervous wreck. I said, Mom, if you don't drive like they drive, you will be hit. And it's kind of that same concept. If you don't get over there and drive aggressively or the same manner in which they drive it, yeah, you will get hit. So you go in there and you drive like they drive. So my father-in-law says, he said, well, if you drove over here, you're a driver. And you're a driver. If you drove here, you're a driver. But yeah, I've had the wonderful experience of driving that whole side of the island. And I just had this conversation a couple of days ago. So, all right. I see your business major as well. That was my undergrad. My undergrad was business administration. And then I did the corporate and organizational communications masters, and then I went back and did an education masters. So I'm looking at the similarities as I go through your bio, and it's always striking to me as I meet people that come on the show how many things that we a lot of times have in common. So you worked your way up. You've had the various positions, and now we've come to the point where really why you're on the show this morning, and that is your whole contribution to News Chaser, The Rhetoric of Trump in Essays and Commentaries. How did your involvement with this project come about?
So you mentioned earlier our mutual friend, and so she and I and two other friends of ours used to do, we're all in doctoral program together, and we had these huge writing assignments that were due every Monday morning. So I had access, of course, to the dean's suite, and so it was easy. The kitchen was there, the bathroom was there, vending machines were there. So we always met there on Sunday afternoons and, did our writing assignments, critiqued each other's work, made sure that we were all had the benefit of each other's strengths. So in a brief discussion, we were just talking about things that we should do, and we had just witnessed a video that was shown in class and about, writing and publishing and being, contributing, to the body of knowledge, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, new doctoral students are like, we don't really have anything to say. We can't imagine. We're overwhelmed by the fact of trying to write a dissertation, much less after you do that major accomplishment to go on and, continue to write. So we're sitting there just talking about, politics of the day and what's going on and an assignment that was tangentially related. And said, it would be interesting if we got some of the better writers in our class to combine and do and publish a book. It'd be something that we at least would graduate saying that we had one published article. And it's out of that, by the way, matter of fact, hanging out kind of conversation that the book comes into fruition, in large part because our mutual friend is an amazing woman when she sets her mind to something.
Yes, indeed.
So she takes a very general conversation about something that, you just talk about. We could do a book. We can write as well as some books that we've seen got published and, gone on to be bestsellers. They don't have anything more to say than we do, blah, 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 blah. Turn around a year and a half later, and here it is in print, and I am amazed that this came out of a conversation over doing an assignment for a class paper. Absolutely. It's certainly much bigger and broader and more refined and academically, peer-reviewed and, all of those accoutrements attached to it. But
Right.
it came out of a general conversation and is a testament to what can happen if you just focus.
No, absolutely right. And when Denise, a.k.a. IO, called me about the project, she started listing off all these people. And a lot of the names I was familiar with, and there was some that I wasn't. But she started listing off all these people who were a part of the project. And I'm sitting there like, wow. And she kind of was explaining to me the whole thing about, again, doing the doctoral program as well, and how it came about. And I'm still sitting there like, wow. And then when the whole piece came with the foreword, I was really like, wow.
Wow. That was a double wow.
Yeah, exactly. That was like a wow. And so so I go off to China, because this was prior to, it was near the end of the school year, because when I'm not doing radio, I'm the principal of a school.
Oh.
So when school year ended, my wife and I, along with the principal of the school in which she serves, and we took 8 students to China. Oh. And we were there, and I told Denise, I said, I'm going to China. When I come back, we'll schedule all the guests for the show. So I'm in China, and I get this text message, or actually I think she tried to call me. I get this text message from Denise, and I look and I said, she must be calling about the book. And I sent her a message back saying, I'm in China. I'll get back to you as soon as I get back to the U.S. So now I get back in the office on Monday, and I hadn't checked my mailbox. And a teacher came in and said, Mr. Medley, I left something for you. And I said, well, I haven't seen it. And she said, oh, I put it in your box. I said, okay, so that forces me to go to my mailbox. I go to my mailbox, and the book is sitting in there.
Yeah.
News Chaser is sitting in my school mailbox. And I look at it and I said, wait a minute, that name sounds familiar. News Chaser. And I said, Denise's book. And I opened it and I start thumbing through it. I'm like, oh my God, it's up and out, produced. It's out in the world now. And immediately I call her and we start chatting back and forth about the folks who are going to be on the show. And as I told you when I talked to her yesterday, this is how the interview this morning came about. And there's others that's contributors going to be on here in the coming weeks. So your chapter, oddly enough, as I just told you, I'm the principal of a school, is dealing with education.
Yes, my certainly my passion.
And so chapter 11, privatizing education. How did that whole thing come about? Okay, you just told me education is your passion. So how did you all select what topics you were going to do in the book?
Well, the wisdom of Denise was in our doctoral group, and like minds kind of gravitate together, and people with a certain amount of drive gravitate together. So in our group, everyone has, in a very Caribbean nature, 2 or 3 jobs.
Oh yeah, I remember those jokes. Back from the day of In Living Color, yes, tree jobs.
Tree jobs.
That's right. So
we were, but everyone within their tree jobs, or for a couple of us, there's some part that we are really passionate about, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to capitalize that in our dissertation. So, we're in political science or we're in communications, whatever, but there's something about which you have a voice, or you want to have a voice and you want to speak. So the chapters are really broken down by what your area of passion is. So for me, it's education, but it's particularly higher education, and it's especially around HBCUs and minority-serving institutions. So that's my thing, where somebody else, another girlfriend of ours is really big on immigration. She has a law degree, and that was her specialty, so that's what she wrote on, and then somebody else did something on cultural identity. So within our group, they're just things that, so when we have conversations, people where the contribution from each person really is about their area of expertise. And so the book, the chapters come about in much the same way.
Okay, so you have, and for those of you listening, if you've just joined us, I truly hope you've been with me since 6, but if you decided to take in the extra hour and join us at 7, my guest is Anne Marie Waterman from Howard University. She has contributed to a book called News Chaser: The Rhetoric of Trump in Essays and Commentaries. Now, let me tell you why this, when I had the conversation about the book, even whenever I wrote my commentary in the beginning of it, what fascinated me was the fact that our president is always talking about the media, fake news wrong, fake news. The truth of the matter is, the media is what the media. I'm in the media, so I know what the media, and I know historically in terms of sound bites and the message that the government wants to get people to believe. Like I've talked on this show before, in terms of the assassinations of JFK and MLK and RFK and Malcolm X. And I know what the media can spin and do. But most of the things that they're reporting on in terms of our current president is not fake. It is real. And he's causing the reality. He's the one that's driving the reality and at the same time calling it fake. And as I said in the first hour, this is what I really would love to see, because D'Antonio in the forward hit the nail right on the head. Donald Trump is loving this. He's touting fake news, but the truth of the matter is he can't get enough of his name being in it. He can't not get enough of him being chased by the media. And that's why this title for me worked when it says news chaser, because that's exactly what the president is. He wants the media to chase him, and he's chasing the media, pretending like he doesn't want it.
Exactly. Well, the other thing, and kudos to the brilliance. I wish I could say that I came up with the title of it, but I didn't. But the other piece of the title that is also a play on words, for those that are, partake of
yes.
You think about the chaser in the beverage, the
yes.
that part that's not alcoholic.
Yes.
So part of what this book talks about too is beyond the news itself. But here's the other part of the news, the chaser part of the news, the whether it's the club soda
yes.
or tonic or the other part that makes the drink what it is.
I love it, because
the news that makes it what it is that you see. These are the undertones of the drink.
I love it, and I'll tell you why, because I tell guests all the time, I love a play on words. When I was teaching, I was a language arts teacher. I taught 8th grade language arts, and so I'm a wordsmith. So along with the public, and whenever I adjunct, I teach public speaking. And so the fact that you just now brought a whole different perspective with it being the chase, I love it.
Another thing we have in common, because public speaking is also one of the courses that I've taught.
See, there you go. But that is a totally different look in terms of, because a friend of mine always says, I'm gonna give it to you without the chaser. In other words, it's gonna be raw. I'm gonna give it to you without the chaser. So this is saying, in other words, it's saying, and I kind of spoke on this as I was giving you the whetting your appetite in the 6 o'clock hour for this. It's kind of helping you to understand, kind of read between the lines of what you see of what's going on. And that's what this is kind of providing. And I laugh because I see here President-elect Donald Trump's rhetoric on education. And I'm reading from the book, the abstract, page 163, Anne Marie Waterman, Howard University. President Donald J. Trump claims that one of his goals, and I love the word claims that one of his goals as president is to, quote, ensure that every child will be placed on the ladder of success, a great education, and a great job, unquote, DonaldTrump.com. However, he has not comprehensively outlined in any definitive manner what will be his overall education policy or specific strategy. Now, I stopped right there when I started reading that, because that line pertains to everything. He said things, but has not outlined a comprehensive strategy on any of it, and education included. Exactly.
And, as you said earlier, lots of sound bites, lots of pithy word usage on this would be important, and I think this would happen. But, okay, fine. If that's what you feel, that's fine. How are we going to actualize the sound bite that you have just done? If it's school choice, okay, we can argue all day about the benefits and demerits. But if that's your plan, if that's your goal, how are you going to actualize it? Because that's the meat and potatoes, that's what we're interested in.
No, that's true. It's like, for me, I'm in public education, but I understand the private. I understand the charter. So I can go either way. I mean, there's some that are staunch. It's kind of like, if you're a public educator, there's no way you can support charter, and vice versa. I don't necessarily agree. Whenever my children were coming through school, they went to private school, and people would say, don't you think that's hypocritical of you being a public school educator sending your kids to private school? Or don't you think that's disingenuous? I said, no, let me tell you why. Because I didn't send my kids to private school because of the teachers. I sent my kids to private school because I knew I'd have like-minded parents. If we were paying $300 or $400 or $500 a month for our child to be in school, you can rest assured we were not going to tolerate a teacher having to tell another child, sit down, shut up, be quiet, stop, don't. We were not going to have our money wasted. So I wasn't worried about the teachers. Matter of fact, in the private school my kids went to, most of the teachers were from Jamaica. They had not gone through any certification process here in the U.S. that we put teachers through, and they just flat foot taught. And my kids learned unreal. Matter of fact, one of them is about to head down your way. She'll be working for Booz Allen Hamilton.
Oh, yes. Good.
Yeah, she's heading down there where she starts in the middle of August. But when I tell you foundationally in that private school, from those ladies who were from Jamaica who did not have teacher NJDOE or DOE certifications, them teachers flat foot taught. So I would tell people, no, it's not about the teachers. It's about, I want it to be with other like-minded parents who were going to make sure that the teacher was not distracted. And once I kind of broke it down that way, people were like, okay, I understand what you're saying. Well, I'm saying all that to say that's my same feeling with private and charter schools. If that's the way that we're going to go, I agree with you. Make a statement and follow a plan one way or the other. But right now we're doing neither.
Exactly. And therein lies the problem. So as is the case in much of his agenda, we'll use that term very loosely here, there's just no substance to it. There's almost nothing to take umbrage with except that there is no plan. You're like, okay, but the worst case, and all of us know that, standing still is really not an option because standing still is really going behind. You're behind. Everything is moving. So, waiting for a plan means that we are behind. And if you, read, Race to the Top and all the other initiatives about where America and its students and the student achievement is in comparison to, the rest of the world, we don't have the luxury of standing still. We need to be moving and moving in a positive direction for the betterment of everybody, not just the children.
Absolutely. There is and I promised my guest last week that I was going to send it to him too. I got to send it out to both of you if you haven't seen it. There's a young man on YouTube that puts education on trial. And it is a fantastic little dramatization of actually putting the educational system on trial in terms of, for the most part, we're still conducting business like we did either pre-agricultural or in the agricultural era.
Absolutely.
And we're now in the academic age. We're in the information age, the education age. And if you don't have some academics about you, you really are going to be lost.
Absolutely.
And yet, school is still being run the same way it was back in the days when we were predominantly farming in the country. I mean, even the schedule is around the crops.
Yes.
Okay. The whole notion of how we put kids together and put them in classrooms and the bell system is like on the industrial age with the factories.
With the factories, yes.
Right. So there is not, I mean, you look at some of these, there's a couple of clips I'll send you, but if you look at the way kids take in information today, you don't necessarily have to have the same age group kid together. No. You could group them based on what they know, their likes, their passions, their abilities, so forth and so on. You could, but we don't. We still do the age thing. We still do the desks in the rows. We still do all these other things that, again, that were there during the industrial and the agricultural time frames.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We certainly do. And when you think about a modern day child, regardless where they are in the spectrum, middle school, elementary school, or high school, and the kinds of responsibilities and the things that they deal with on a daily basis. And this is not even the dysfunctional family or any of that. This is not regular the mill, mom, dad, 2.5 kids and a dog, all of them. But the level of things that they have to deal with because the world has changed is so, you can't even make the comparison between that child and the child 20 years ago.
Correct.
To teach them the same. Their capacity to learn, and the way that they learn is so very different, which is problematic when you think of it from a teaching standpoint. Generally speaking, there are not a lot of young teachers in the market and the industry.
Right.
And they are teaching the way that they were taught.
Right.
Well, it worked for them, and why go with, if quote-unquote, it's not broke, don't fix it. But children aren't learning the same way, young people aren't learning the same way, and it presents quite an abyss, actually, between what students and administrators are expecting, and students, their willingness even to achieve in the same way.
You're absolutely correct.
They place on it.
No, you're absolutely correct. One of the where I'm taking my building into, we started it this past year, and over the summer, some teachers have done some professional development or professional learning community. Is the Universal Design for Learning (UDL), and that's where you're doing a lot more tactile. Because, matter of fact, if you look into the premise of UDL, it will tell you that print media puts most of our kids, or many of our kids, in 2017 at a disadvantage. If that's the only way you come at them is through print, that they're already in many cases disadvantaged. So they're saying that you've got to get into the auditory, you've got to get into the kinesthetic, you got to get into way more different ways to approach them. And certainly, and what I've been sharing with my teachers, I said, let me tell you right now, the stand up and lecture for an hour, hour and a half, these kids are not going to connect with that at all. At all.
None. And even students at the further end, even in our doctoral program and in the master's level, people are like, okay, I need some realistic context for this theory. You just can't spat out a theory and yet worked 20 years ago. What does it have to do with the price of rice in China today? How is that going to be useful? How is it applied? So even, and at that time, at the PhD level, you certainly have really, really, for the most part, older faculty members, and to get them to engage in a very different way, because they like storytelling, and while that's a great way to learn, you've got to do, unfortunately, some of the bells and whistles too. Whether you're doing it or your TA is doing it, but you've got to introduce it into the classroom to make it, quite frankly, interesting and stimulating, and so that it's a natural part of the everyday learning experience, because we're getting our news, on our phone, RSS, all these different ways. And very few people are, reading the Washington Post over tea anymore, even though that's like my favorite thing to do on a Sunday. But it is a rare thing that I even get to do it, and I liked to do it because there's so many other responsibilities and things that you're trying to fit into your 24-hour day or your weekend, as the case may be. So I think for us to be effective as a nation, I mean, we just really have to examine all the modalities, but on the other side of it, to be fair to older faculty who are really good and very knowledgeable, the question becomes, what do you do?
Right.
Well, that are not useless. How do we find a useful way to integrate them into this process?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I was sharing last week, because most of my guests this year, matter of fact, my year started 2017. My first show in January started with education. It was with Dr. Steve Perry. And the bulk of my guests this year have been education related. Those who have been listening to this, the bulk of my guests this year have been in some capacity of education. And the listeners know, if they've been listening, and they've been loving it. I mean, in some capacity, we've been talking about this whole notion of education. And I was having this conversation last Saturday, and I've had it throughout the week in terms of cell phone. You just referenced mobile devices, cell phone usage. We constantly in our public school in the urban area battle this whole thing of kids bringing their phones to school. And I mean, and we constantly share with them, when I was a kid, they would put a dime in the pocket. We used a payphone or what have you. Or
we're asking you, what does that look like?
Right. We're like, what is a payphone? We don't even know what that is. Or you made your call from the school phone, from the main office. But parents will stand you down that their child must have that cell phone with them in case of an emergency. I have kids going in the bathroom, calling parents, giving them cockeyed stories. Parents come up to the school heated with half stories. And I tell the kid, do not do that. Call from the school phone only because we need to know what you're telling your parents. So my thing with the teachers was, okay, let's see if we can flip this. And especially after learning about UDL, and I said, let's see if we can now use, because there are plenty of apps out there that you can actually have the kids download on their phone, and the phone becomes a response mechanism. So you can teach a lesson and have the kids anonymously respond to a question through their cell phone.
Absolutely. And it does so many, other than, the obvious of integrating, technology and mobile devices and, Web 2.0 devices. The more important thing of this is for students who would otherwise not speak, not raise their hand. It gives them an opportunity to weigh in on the decision, and then, a nice creative, instructor then says, okay, well, most of you chose B as the answer.
Correct.
Well, the answer is really C, and here's why.
That's right.
Because of so-and-so and so, but here's why C is the better of the two answers. it's a great way. Nobody's embarrassed. Faces saved. Everybody's learned. Instructors gotten an opportunity to do a compare and contrast. So many, of the initiatives and agenda for the class day have been achieved. And participation.
That's correct.
All those things are done.
I mean, when I went to the UDL workshop that I went to, the facilitator introduced us to so many different apps that the teacher could use to teach as well as the student could use that I guarantee you would engage the child, and they're not tuning out to a lecture. Mm-hmm. The child would be so excited they wouldn't even realize they were learning.
Exactly. Sometimes you got to sneak it up on them.
Yeah.
Because there are times, I will tell you, even as I'm sitting in, one of my quantitative research classes or something, that, an aha moment comes, you're like, oh, gosh, I just realized that, 2 courses ago. This would have been blah, blah. But, it shows its, rears its head at odd times. But it is very, very helpful. And, those kinds of things, as we talk about, Trump and what he's talking about with education, and then our discussion about different ways to teach people, it's those things that concern me in his lack of definitive planning. Because all students are not learning the same. You've got cultural things going on. You've got social things going on, and, financial, and on and on and on and on. And it is difficult, as most educators and administrators in the process know, to get a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
One-size-fits-most would be great, but even that is difficult to achieve. And then when you bring in regional peculiarities and so on, what do you do? Yes, it'd be great if parents had choices, but in certain areas the choice is bad or badder.
Right.
Not
That's
good
correct.
Or a better school. So how do I make that decision? And, at the heart, and it's something that I reference in my few pages in the book, in the heart of a parent or parents or family's goal is for their children, their offspring, their nephews, wherever it is in the, the community that's raising this young person, they want them to have good things and do better.
Correct.
That is at the heart across all cultures, races, and so on. You want the next generation to do better.
That's correct.
Whatever that means, whatever that looks like. And better is a relative phrase. But the fact of the matter is, how do we help actualize that? How do we, because it's the one place that I think unanimously everybody looks. If I can, if Johnny or Jill or Marquise or whomever, Mohammed, whatever, if we can get them to learn and understand and to read and to participate and so on, their life and their choices will be, more grand, they'll have more of them and so on. And all of that starts with school. So education and the institution and the people and the buildings have a lot of responsibility, but very little respect.
You're absolutely right. And tying it back to the book, and I want to talk a little bit about that, the need for why our kids must understand the important education. But tying it back to the book, you're right. It has to be, I get what they're saying in terms of we don't want to be dictating to the states or the local boards what to do. But at the same time, like you said, some type of plan or strategy nationwide does have to come out of the government.
Absolutely.
It may not be every jot and tittle of every little thing you have to do, micromanage, but at the same time, you have to have something. Now, I can tell you, with No Child Left Behind, I don't know about other communities, but I know in the urban community, or the one in which I've served in for the last 16, 17 years, folks were so confused by that title. I would get parents coming to me arguing with me that their child could not be retained because the president said no child left behind.
Absolutely.
You cannot retain my child. They cannot be left back because the president said there will be no child left behind. So a lot of it, each little tagline or whatever, or each title can be confusing, but at least it did give you a framework for some direction.
Exactly.
Where right now, we're not getting any, other than a lot of doublespeak. You have Betsy DeVos in place, and so I see where you've broken your few pages up into sections. We had the abstract piece in the beginning. Then we have Trump on education and choice. We kind of talked a little bit about that. Donald Trump on the business of education. Talk a little bit about that. I think we've kind of been talking about that. And then you go into Trump on the Department of Education. I really want you to talk a little bit about that because there are some views, and I see you have them listed here, that maybe the whole department needs to be done away with.
Yeah, that, when in doubt, just get rid of it.
Trump on
Don't try to make it better.
Right.
Don't try to understand how it got to where it is, or how that there may be some goodness in some parts of it, and so we fix, the part that's diseased, and make the whole limb work. No.
Kind of like he's doing healthcare. Same deal.
Yeah, just get rid of it.
Trump on student debt. That's interesting in and of itself. Trump on student debt. Let's see. And then we have Trump on history. Oh, that's an oxymoron. Trump on comprehensive education, limited majors, and funding. And then I remember a couple months ago, he had all the HBCU heads there.
Yes,
and that's whenever that whole picture with what's her name on the couch came about.
Yes, that was quite a thing. And while, to be honest with you, as I think about that whole piece, I was saddened that we spent as much time as we did talking about her, in my opinion, complete, blatant, and flagrant disrespect.
Right.
Okay, but, that aside, that we spent more time talking about that than the nature of why the meeting was called, what was hoped to be achieved, what happened in the meeting, would there be future meetings, et cetera, et cetera. It's not often that you get, major heads of HBCUs in one space at the same time that they have called the meeting. So for someone else to have called it, a conversation about, okay, well, your intent was this just a nice little photo op? Anything consequential? Was it just a meet and greet, grip and grin, as they used to say when I was in photography? What was it all about? Was it that the real substance of the meeting, again, the news chaser piece, did not rise to the top. It really, we've spent more time focused on her and her, bad manners than we did on, here are these presidents, and I'm sure they're, if grouped, or if, no question, they realize that there are certain themes that come out regardless of size and location of institution. There are certain things that, permeate all HBCUs and what can be done about it.
Correct.
How they collaborate and help each other, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What happened to all of that? It was a great opportunity, and it just seemed that while all of that discussion may not have happened at the meeting, we don't even know because we didn't really spend a whole lot of time on that part.
I concur. I could not agree with you more because, truth be told, we really didn't hear too much about what the contents of the meeting was about, nor the outcome. The focus
or the follow-up. What we're supposed to go back and do, and so we could have some substantive conversation. What, or even if one was not solicited, you, President, blah, 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 of ABC institution, what are you going to use as this opportunity? Do you see this opportunity to, send your concerns directly or indirectly to the President or to Secretary DeVoe? What is it, that you are going to use this experience to do to move, your wedge a little closer to the goal?
Right. And unfortunately, it did get overshadowed by, what is it, Carrie Ann? That's her name. I believe it's Carrie Ann. And it did get overshadowed by that. And I'm looking here on page 170, Trump on student debt. And this fascinates me only because, on the one hand, being in his financial situation, I would probably say he has no clue in terms of financing college education or what it's about. But at the same time, there's a side of me that says because he filed bankruptcy so many different times in the business, he's used that leverage that he might be able, but I don't think at this level he would. It says a 4-year degree today can be expensive enough to create 6-figure debt. Trust me, I know. I'm still paying Dell State. Or shall I say the government that did the student loan. we can't forgive these loans, but we should take steps to help students. The big problem is the federal government. There's no reason the federal government should profit. Oh, preach. As they say, you better preach. from student loans, because my interest rate, because I didn't stop paying them for a little bit, and then the interest rate went even higher. This only makes an already difficult problem worse. Part of Trump's profile is his ongoing insistence that he is a successful businessman, and to be successful in life, individuals must master understanding and the manipulation of money and debt. Having the specter of debt following young workers was one of the proclaimed reasons for establishing Trump University, and we all know where that came and where that went.
Crashed and burned.
Yes. Simply put, Trump University was supposed to provide a first-class education to eager real estate want-to-be moguls by utilizing the knowledge and experience of seasoned business practitioners. So let's talk a little bit about what is his thinking on student, because I guess he's thinking, I guess in his mind it would be like, if we didn't even have to make the loan, like why should we even have to be in that business? Or the other way around would be, let's make as much profit from it as we can. Or has he definitively said anything on that? So,
as is what I will say seems to be his pattern, he's all over the place.
Exactly.
So, on one hand, you're saying, it is outrageous, clutching my imaginary pearls here, for the government to extend these loans and then make money off of them. How could they? A businessman making that stance. You should be wary right there. But then on the other hand, he says, but absolutely not. We will absolutely not do community colleges free. I'm going to need you to be somewhere, left or right, in the middle, something.
Right.
Because faculty members have to be paid, the janitors at the schools need to be paid. I mean, people are working, so they have to be paid. Where's that salary coming from? This, unfortunately, to use the phrase my Caribbean parents like to say, this is America and everything costs.
Yeah, it is. It's a phrase, but unfortunately, there's some truth to it.
So, what we can dicker over is, the cost. And then we'll get into things that people don't want to talk about, like, okay, does it make sense to spend $50,000 a year at institution ABC in Washington, D.C., not Howard, thank you, Jesus, per year versus, the $24,000, $25,000 it may cost to go to Howard a year? What makes one education, quote unquote, better than, if we use price as the gauge, than another?
Right.
So it's beyond the debt itself. The debt is a soundbite of the conversation, but just the cost and the monetization of education is the topic. What do we do? The cost of education and tuition has spiraled grossly out of control.
Yes.
Superseded the cost of inflation and other things. And yet we still buy into the tenet that education is the way. It's the great equalizer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it is becoming a more difficult and challenging goal to achieve because it is not cheap.
No, it is not. And what happens is it becomes yet another, let me see what the word I'm looking for, because it kind of puts you into the haves and the have-not categories. Absolutely. In terms of affordability. Absolutely. And so if I can't go because I can't afford it, now when I go for that job interview and I don't have college on my resume, therefore I'm boxed out. Exactly.
And that is, as one, with HR, as yet another job within my job, that's the first weeding thing.
That's the word I was looking for. Weeding out. Yes.
You do need a college degree, 2 or 4. Okay, boom. And then, that takes you the smaller batch. And then you look and, what other experience do they have? And then, you do a weeding. But it is the easiest, quote, unquote, objective qualifier to define who even makes it into the consideration to be interviewed before we even get to interviewing. So you almost give, there's really no choice because there are very few jobs now that don't require some level of post-secondary knowledge. Very, 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 very few. And while it seems, depending on your perspective, that there are many more students who, whether it's the reality of the finance or the reality of their aspiration based on their own experiences and what they see or don't see, the absence of in their communities, that, I don't know that I can spend 4 years, maybe perhaps not working, not contributing to family, household and finance and helping with my siblings or whatever the case may be to do this education thing.
Correct.
With absolutely no guarantee that at the end of it, I will have a job.
That is correct. And see, and that's, I mean, it is one of the craziest paradoxes, because it's one of those like, all right, I won't hire you unless you have it, but I can't get it because I don't have the money or the funding. So it's kind of like, so like you said, from a weeding out mechanism, no question. And then when you get into the levels, we were talking earlier, as I was teasingly talking about the difference between a Harvard, Harvard, and a Howard, Howard. The truth of the matter is I've been on both of those campuses. A building is a building is a building. A room is a room is a room. An overhead projector is an overhead projector. And for lack of, I mean, a professor is a professor is a professor. You start getting into these really exorbitant costs, because it's like when you go to Macy's, you're paying for the name of the store. You're paying for the name of the college, but an education is an education. And it really, at the end of the day, really comes down to the person in terms of what they make out of their education. But in this country, in the U.S., we still, if you walk in that door with a Harvard degree versus, a community college degree, it is looked at totally different.
Absolutely.
And so when you start talking about the cost to finance a Harvard versus a community college, it's just out of the question.
Absolutely. And I have a lot of respect for community colleges and the heavy lifting that they have to do.
Right.
And they're in HBCUs and the heavy lifting that they have to do.
Right.
Because what invariably happens at the end of the day, the reality of the situation is simply that not all students, but there is a larger proportion of students that are not as prepared at the beginning.
Right. You get into the remedial courses.
Would like them to.
That's correct. Exactly. Yep.
But when, and I like to call it normalized as opposed to remediated.
Right.
They will achieve at the same rates or even better than those that came in not necessarily needing it. And part of that has to do with hunger.
Correct.
I know I need to run a little faster, get up a little earlier, because, I'm not the world class. I don't have it necessarily naturally. I wasn't born, with
right.
lightning speed.
Right.
So I need to practice a little more to get a rhythm and a pace and all those other things that are going to make it successful for me to get to the finish line. But that work, that, getting students to where they should have been when they arrived at the door, is beyond the heavy lifting that I like to say. It's also an expensive endeavor.
No, it really is.
It is necessary for us to do, because it is not that these students are not capable. They have just been ill-prepared or
right. And see, again,
you've got to write that.
And this is where it comes full circle to what we were talking about in terms of delivery of education, because the child in and of him or herself may not have been academically challenged. They may have been academically challenged in that particular style of delivery, but if they had the opportunity to display their talent in another way, they would have excelled. And see, that's where education to me hasn't made that pivot. We're still expecting kids to do pencil paper tests, even if it's on a computer. We're still expecting that display of what's considered knowledge, compared with a child that knows nothing about an engine, that can stand over there and break that engine down and put it back together and tell you all about it. Mm-hmm. Or, my teachers get on me about this all the time. Mr. Medley, I don't understand why you all are always pushing differentiated instruction, but everybody takes the same test. It gets into, the way we do, what we consider education, to me, a lot of times in a 2017 really does not necessarily capture someone's ability.
Yes.
That's what I guess I'm trying to say.
Ability, as you said, to come full circle, but it's that ability that we expect. If we buy into the equation that one goes to college and the degree in some shape, way, or form then gets you, air quotes, a job. On said job, the expectation is that you are going to be an innovative thinker. No matter what you're doing,
right.
That's the expectation. You're going to take initiative, you're going to understand concepts and be able to apply them in unfamiliar ways, blah, 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 blah. that's what it is. But when we teach you, we want you to learn it all the same.
Yes. But see, that, and that's exactly that.
If we never teach that.
Right. In terms of, because our mission really, is to develop critical thinkers. That's why I'm constantly challenging you. Don't tell them the answer. Let them struggle. Let them figure it out. Because when they get into quote unquote the real world, they are going to have to figure things out. And I shared this example with somebody. I bought an air conditioner a couple days ago, and thank God, I have some mechanical inclination.
The instructions missing a few steps, were they?
It wasn't a matter of missing. They were just very vague. But even the fact that the architects and the engineers of the air conditioner would expect an average consumer to do it. I literally had to dismantle the air conditioner. I had to pull the compressors out of the case. There was a certain way, like the little top latch that latches onto the window for it to catch and not fall out. The screws had to go from inside the air conditioner instead of coming down from the outside. There were other screws that had to be put inside of the case instead of them being put on the outside of the case. I got the company on the phone, their rep, they got the little piece of my mind that was left in terms of how on earth would you expect an everyday consumer to do this? And then so maybe I thought I was the only one, but I had other people come over and look at it, and they said, we've never in our lives seen anybody have to do that to get an air conditioner in the window. Because I told the rep, my expectation was I take the air conditioner out the box, put it in the window, put the window down, turn the thing on. Because it's hot as hell in my house. I'm not expecting to sit here and have to go through all of this just to get. And I'm telling my sister the story, and she's just laughing.
I'm sure she is.
She's like, you're heated three ways. You're already hot from the temperature. You were already hot at the fact that you had to buy one, and now you're hot that you can't get it in the window without all of this complicated. It was ridiculous. But it's just like I served 9 years in the Air Force as a jet engine mechanic, so it kind of made a little bit of sense to me. But it was kind of like, why should I have to go through all of this? And then the thing was heavy as heck, so I had to call somebody help me.
You're trying to level it to make sure that it's in the window.
That's exactly right. So now I had to call my god brother over, help me slide this thing into the case because it's too heavy. But but my point in sharing that story was, and I shared it with the teacher, I said, but after all the cursing, the kicking, the screaming, the moaning, the whining, after it was done and in the window, there was this sense of accomplishment that I figured it out. With all the struggle, with all the agita and all the sweat and the getting angry and throwing the instructions and cursing out the rep, it still was a sense of fulfillment of, I figured it out. Exactly. And I was sharing with the teacher, that's the same thing that could happen for our students if you allow them to struggle.
A little bit of struggle is not going to kill them.
Right.
They're brilliant. And if we introduce it to them earlier, it will not seem like such a foreign topic, like everything is supposed to come Google fast.
Yes. And that's where, at my level, at the elementary school level, we're trying to create critical thinkers. We need you to be able to read. We need you to be able to write, speak, count, all those things. But we also need you to be able to get to the idea of figuring something out. Because as you just said, when you step into your job, your company, when you walk in that door, when they hire you, they're expecting initiative. They're expecting you to be able to solve problems.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't have experience doing that, if you don't even know where to start or how to start, or, you're just sitting there stumped and on your way to a very quick termination.
Right.
You are a great service. And then that student loan that you spent, that you figured you had 6 months, and it took you 6 months to get this job, now, you're worrying about default. And,
Correct.
Here we are again with, finances get in the way, and then your credit score gets impacted, and your ability to buy changes, and it's just a cyclical snowball that you're like, oh, my gosh.
No, it is.
How could this have happened?
Going back to what you're saying in terms of direction from Washington, those are the type conversations that Betsy DeVos and Trump and everybody needs to be having with state educators, state DOEs as well. The same kind of conversation we're having right now is the conversation, like, how do we make that happen?
Exactly. And that's the expectation. And regardless about, all the other kinds of things that are going on with, Trump and the Trumpites, as I like to call them, the
right.
reality is we do need, while we don't need, as a friend of mine used to say, a government to read, write, and spell for us.
Right.
We do need them to help us in terms of interpretation of all the goals that there are to achieve as a country, as a nation. These are the 4, or the 3, or the 2, or the 1 that we are going to, as a nation, focus on.
Right.
And all 5th graders be able to
Correct.
By the time you finish high school, you should be able to do these set of things with ease, proficiency, et cetera, et cetera.
And you're absolutely right.
Individuality on the state level to say, okay, well, we're a southern state, and this is the cultural thing that's built into our water and our air, and so we're going to achieve it this way. But no matter what, by the time they finish 5th grade, high school, or whatever the case may be, they would have been able to achieve exactly what the markers are.
Bingo. And what you just hit was exactly the way that I get criticized for it all the time. Matter of fact, and sometimes I'll get my evaluation marked down because of it, but I truly believe in what you just said. I tell the teachers all the time, we give you the curriculum. At the end of the semester or the 6 weeks or the 8 weeks or whatever it is, what the child should be able to do. Quite frankly, I don't care how you get there. Long as legal, moral, ethical.
Exactly.
If you want to have the kids playing whatever on the floor, whether it's Twister or playing Trouble or whatever, if they get whatever from that game they're supposed to do after those 6 weeks, I could care less. That's kind of like the way it's like, here's the end. We call it backwards planning. Mm-hmm. Here is your end goal. You now come up with the way you want to get the kid to get it. My only thing is the kid got to get it, because I don't want to hear at the end of the semester my boss coming in and saying, Mr. Medley, why were they playing games?
Right, and not be able to say, well,
right.
The reason that they were playing Twister is because I was ensuring that they knew color.
Right.
And therefore, and be able, when they got into these various shapes, trying to touch the color, be able to identify that they were in a triangle or they were in a square or... there's a zillion ways to do it. But like you said, the concept of beginning with the end in mind, Covey gets that.
Right.
He said it then, it worked, decades ago, it's still good now. You have to figure out where you're going and then take the time to figure out, okay, now, there's several ways to get here.
Right.
Go up the mountain, on the freeway. Okay, we can't afford tolls, so look pricey that way, so we're going to go through the city, spend a little more gas, but we'll be able to see some urban experiences while we're doing that.
That's correct.
But again, it's planning and deciding that for this particular circumstance, this particular time, and the resources that we have, here is how we are going to do it. And I don't see where that takes away states' rights. It still allows them to be creative,
correct,
diverse in their application, but it ensures that Americans, at a certain level, there's an expectation, which then makes it easier all the way around if you even take it to business. The expectation when one gets out of college and why oftentimes employers require, a college degree, and will take almost any college degree, even with a BA on it, fine.
Right.
It's because they know there's a certain level of knowledge and understanding that's been achieved because you did this 4 or 5, 6, however many years it takes you to earn the degree.
Right.
But you have a certain level of understanding and ability to make, for critical thinking and to make decisions and to, come up with new ideas, whatever it is. That's all that the degree says. That's what that first degree says.
Correct.
You have started, you have finished, you have some basic concepts, you've done some classic reading, you can string some words together, make, a sentence, a comprehensive thought, blah, 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 blah. Not unusual.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to roll over. Actually, I'm 15 minutes rolling over into the 8 o'clock hour. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to continue talking with Anne Marie Waterman as we work our way to the end of this enjoyable and enlightening and informational conversation in terms of, again, education. There is nothing more critical for a country. The only thing that might be a little bit more critical, and they're running neck and neck, or either they're really close. I guess I would put families number one, the family structure. But there is nothing beyond that than education in terms of moving a country. In terms of a country moving in the right direction, the education system has to be in place. Therefore, your few pages or your chapter, your contribution, whatever you want to call it, in terms of education. President-elect Donald Trump's rhetoric on education. Let me give you the weather and do my top of the hour, and then we'll conclude when we come back. And as I said, I hope you've been with me the entire time because the conversation is so important, and I hope it has made you think. If you're a parent that have school-age children, I hope it's made you think. If you're a college graduate or a student in college, I hope it's made you think. For wherever you are in life, I hope the conversation we've had this morning, if nothing else, have made you critically think.
WPSC, Wayne, New Jersey. On the radio, 88.7 FM. Online, gobrave.org. A tune-in radio station. Part of the William Patterson Broadcast Network.
Broadcasting live from Hobart Hall in Wayne, New Jersey.
This is
The Innovative.
I think they're really unique.
The Fearless.
They have awesome variety.
The Kick-Ass.
I love Brave New Radio.
The Sensational.
I've never heard anything like it.
This is the one and only Brave New Radio.
Straight from the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center, here's your local forecast.
We have crept up to 73.7 degrees in the Wayne, New Jersey area. We're working our way up to a high of 91, and then we're going to fall back to 70. Some sun this morning with increasing clouds. Rain showers early will evolve into more steady rain overnight. Tomorrow, Sunday, considerable cloudiness, occasional rain showers in the afternoon, high of 82. Thunderstorms in the night, 69 as a low. Monday, scattered thunderstorms developing during the afternoon, high of 80. Scattered thunderstorms in the evening, low of 64. On Tuesday, expected to be partly cloudy again, high of around 80, low of 61 with a few clouds on Tuesday night, and then rounding out the forecast on Wednesday, partly cloudy, high of 82. And it's going to remain partly cloudy Wednesday night with a low of 67. That is the weather brought to you right here from the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center.
Hey everyone, let's all stop what we're doing and take a moment. You see? Every moment can be kind of special. But they can be loud moments, goofy moments, dorky moments, it doesn't matter. Because every time dads like us take a moment like that to spend with our kids, well, it's pretty momentous. So let's take a moment to make a moment. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Today we decided to walk to school. At the corner, we waited to cross the street. The stoplight counted down. 15, 14,
31? 13?
We took a left on Carroll Garden Street.
Garden Street?
Loud music was coming from a car. Danny's a smart kid, but he gets so distracted.
There were so many other sounds, I didn't know what to focus on.
Danny, Earth to Danny. Suddenly, he realized he forgot his homework again.
I left my homework on the table.
At the school steps, we hugged goodbye. I really hope he doesn't have another bad day at school today.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free online resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Get personalized recommendations, practical tips, daily access to experts, and more. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org. Brought to you by Understood and the Ad Council.
You're listening to The Reading Circle with Marc Medley on Brave New Radio.
Yes, indeed. You've listened to The Reading Circle with the new time where my guests join me at 7 o'clock, and we usually run till about now. But people always ask me, what in the world are we going to talk about for an hour? And as it turns out, we usually wind up running over an hour because it really is a conversation. And the hope is in the conversation that we all learn something. And I have thoroughly, as you've heard me say, this year, all my years were good, but this year seemed to have just ratcheted up to a new level, especially in the realm of education. And my guest this morning has delivered in that area as well, and that is Anne Marie Waterman. And she is out of Howard University. And every time I think of Howard, I think about my good friend Keith, because I know he just enjoyed his experience. He talks about Howard all the time and his experience when he was down there. So we've been talking education this morning. We've been talking about the book. And there's going to be, this is one of the few times I'm actually going to wind up kind of like doing a series, because each contributor has an opportunity to be a guest on the show individually to talk about their contribution. And the book is News Chaser, Newschaser. And as you heard Anne Marie say earlier, it is a wonderful play on words, because you always hear Donald Trump talking about fake news and the media and this and that, but the truth of the matter is he can't live without the media. He is, as much as he don't want to say it, he does chase the media. He chases the news, and he wants the media to chase him. Then there's another play on the word, another perspective that Anne Marie gave, and that's, like I said, my godbrother always said, I gave it to him without the chaser. Well, if those of you who imbibe every now and again, you know that you have a chaser. I mean, like when I drink my Hennessy, I drink it straight. People look at me like, you don't want anything? Nope, I'm good. But people have a chaser to kind of wash it down, to kind of soften it up a little bit, to kind of, well, that was the other perspective that Anne Marie gave, that we're kind of giving you the chaser, the in between the lines as you look at each contribution. And hers happened to be education. And that's what we've been talking about for the last hour and 20 minutes or so. So Anne Marie, in terms of the book, are you all doing any book signings, or are you going out? How do you all see this whole thing going now that it's out?
Now that it's out, and we're all over the wow of it all, there definitely will be book signings. There is one scheduled at Howard's Bookstore. I don't have the date just yet, and so we'll get that publicity out. And there is a schedule, besides the schedule of book signings, there was also another schedule of speaking engagements where Dr. Harris, who is the editor of the piece, will do some speaking, and then, various authors within the book will also speak. We're really, really happy. I'm really happy to be in such a good and rarefied company.
Right.
As one of the authors in the book. So it will be nice to meet, because I have not met, and actually I have not met perhaps about half of the authors I have not met. The others I know. So it'll be good for us to actually all meet and kind of talk about our experiences and, do the usual networking and academic discourse and exchange and, solve all the problems of the world, because that's what we do.
Exactly.
And from there. So I'm looking forward to, there's lots more publicity to be done. The book's been out maybe 2 weeks now, maybe
right.
3. But we're really excited, and we, more than anything, hope that individually and collectively it helps to forward a discussion,
right,
and cause people to be more conscious about, their opinions and their choices, whether
right.
it's on education or immigration or housing or all the other topics that are covered, that these are not topics that are about other people. They're about our individual, responsibilities and these things impact us directly. It's not something that's happening to those people or other people or marginalized people or immigrants or whatever it is, that the topics transcend and really come down to the granular detail and impact us on a very individual basis. And hopefully they will have more conversations in their home and in their own circles or in, they're on their jobs, and get the conversation going so that we have a more, as an old commercial used to say, a more educated consumer.
Yes, indeed. And, one of the things, because I am an avid, when you say avid, I'm talking about avid to the second, third, fourth degree, or fourth power, if you will, mathematically, in terms of reading. But one of the things that I love about reading is it does allow one to engage in intelligent conversation. Now, I don't want to toot our horns this morning, but I will. This morning, we've had intelligent conversation. And by reading, you have the opportunity. I really don't care what opinion you formulate one way or the other. We can debate it. We can discuss it. We can talk about it. But that is the only way to move the ball forward.
Exactly.
And that's my point with whenever you read, and you read a book like this where you have different chapters on different areas, as you just heard Anne Marie said, it's not other people, this is us. And when I say us, I'm not even talking about just any particular race or gender. I'm talking about Americans, This impacts all of us. And unfortunately, as D'Antonio wrote in the foreword, a lot of people have been duped into thinking it's not us.
Correct.
And so for right,
other people,
right? That's exactly right.
A nation that must move in an intelligent and informed and conscious way.
And again, that's what reading does. So I highly encourage those of you in the listening audience. I put it out last night saying it's a Reading Circle recommended book, News Chaser, NEWSCHASER. What I started doing on my blog site, The Critical Thinker, I started putting a book of the month. News Chaser will be my August book of the month. My book of the month for July was White Rage by Carolyn Anderson. So my book of the month for August is going to be News Chaser, and I put the picture on my blog and everything. Highly recommend that you get it. Read the various chapters in there. As I said, this is one of the few series that I've done, but each author has the opportunity to come on and talk about their contribution. Now, one last thing, a couple of things before I say last thing. One of the things I was talking to Denise about yesterday, I said, you do understand there is a good chance that this book is going to land on President Trump's desk.
Yeah, we talked about that. We talked about how you felt about that. I said, well, I know for me and the other, doctoral students that are part of this project, that we are, committed and we stand behind what we said. And certainly all of our mentors and advisors have, made sure that we have fact-checked, everything and cited appropriately and all of that. So we're not particularly worried. And as young students, we are like, oh, fine, that's good. That's more exposure.
And see, that's where I am. That's what I tell. Do you know what? Personally, I hope it lands on his desk. Yes. I mean, I don't think anyone should be in fear of retribution or any kind of retaliation or any of that. I honestly hope it winds up, and if it doesn't get on his desk, somebody in on his team, because he is a media hog. So if it's something that's about him, somewhere along the lines, it's going to make its way there. And I honestly hope it does. I really do. And maybe somebody might, if not him, maybe somebody on that team of his will pick it up. You know what? They got a pretty good point here, sir. Maybe we need to take a look at this.
Exactly. And our work would have been done because that is the point. The point, contrary to what people may take away is, oh, this is just another book that, pokes fun or takes issue or is irreverent regarding our president. That is certainly not the intent. The intent is we are at a critical time in the nation where we have tough issues that require, decisive action, but also require strong discourse from all sides so that we can make the best decision for all of us.
Absolutely. And the last thing I do for the guests is I turn the microphone off and give you the opportunity to promote. We kind of talked a little bit about book signings or whatever, but at this point you have the chance to shout anyone out, promote any book signings or any events or how to get in touch with you, or you have the opportunity to kind of like shout out anything you want with the exception of a dollar amount, but with the exception of pricing or anything like that, because people can, once they get in touch with you, you all can haggle that out. But with the exception of pricing, you have the mic, the floor is yours before we close out. But I thank you so much for taking the time this morning. I've enjoyed the conversation immensely.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I guess my shout-out is relatively very short. First of all, I must thank Denise for all that she continues to do for me, her professional development, and her faith in my talent and my voice. I encourage everyone to definitely, it's a good read, it's a quick read, to definitely go out and purchase News Chaser. It's an interesting and a different perspective on the presidency, the office of the president, and the kinds of expectations that as a nation we would hope that, they get in the business of working on. And please stay tuned. Please visit the Howard University's bookstore. You will definitely get information in terms of this book and other books like this, in terms of making sure that we foster conversations and encourage discourse to make us and take us to better places. Thanks a lot for having me this morning. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. I will be in touch because I am going to send you there's a couple of video clips I'm going to send you about how, there's really appropriate or apropos, if you will, in terms of the state of education. At least in my mind, I happen to agree with both vignettes. They're both YouTube videos. I'll make sure I send them to you because they were sent to me by various educators, and so I've been sharing them with other folks that are enlightened, if you will. And
Oh, the one thing I did want to say, completely forgot of my own personal shout out, which is I certainly welcome commentary, critiques, comments on my chapter or what you've heard today. Please feel free to send those to Waterman, just the way it sounds, WATERMANHU @gmail.com. So it's watermanhu @gmail.com.
all right. Well, I know you're recuperating from your surgery. I hope that continues to go well.
Thank you.
I wish you nothing but Godspeed in terms of your pursuit of the doctorate.
Thank you. I will keep that in mind, those long writing hours.
I know that's right. Well, I tell you what, have a wonderfully blessed day and week, and we will certainly be in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. Well, that ends another edition of the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. Big shout outs to my mom and her girlfriend, Kathy Farish, is visiting with her. I hope they had an opportunity to listen to this morning, because I know when they get together, they have so many laughs and good times. Ain't no telling what time they went to bed last night. So I don't know if they had an opportunity to listen in this morning or not, but I hope they did. And to all of you, anyone else in the listening audience who are my usual listeners, Lestine Robinson, Linda Miller, the young lady, what's her name? I had it on with me last week, Linda's daughter, and any of the other folks around the world who are listening. Valerie Hunter. I'm trying to think of some other folks, because when you start calling names, of course, you always leave out somebody. But any of you in the listening audience, I hope you've caught these interviews this year, and we can make some impact on our education system, because it is not the best. And I work in the system in and of itself. There's got to be a way that we can produce more academically astute children. And it takes a partnership between home, school, and if the child is in a religious church or what have you, you can't get any better than that triangle, the home, church, and the school. Now, a lot of times folks believe what they believe or don't believe what they don't believe, so the church may not be included, but there's no question beyond the home and the school. Those two things, you can't get around that. You can't get around home and school, because every child has some semblance of a home and they come to school. The church is a choice for many, not for me, but for many. The church is a choice. But if you can get all three, most of the time you have an academically astute or a child with the potential to be academically astute if you get those three things working together amongst everything else. And then when you put on top of it, as you just heard Anne Marie talking about, some guidance from the government, not necessarily micromanagement, but some guidance, then most likely we'll begin to produce what some of these other countries are producing.